I wanted to start out by talking to you about, I know that you weren't, it's common knowledge that you weren't allowed to see films growing up. But were you at least exposed to the art of storytelling at a young age that sparked some kind of creative ambition in you?
Well, it wasn't just me. It was our entire church. So I didn't know anybody who saw movies, so I didn't exactly feel deprived because movies were outside of our realm of experience.
Sure.
Which, actually, looking back, wasn't a bad thing at all, since it forced us to rely on an older and perhaps better form of storytelling, which is the kind around the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And my relatives, my uncles in particular, were great storytellers. And so I remember as a kid just sitting around listening to these kind of endless yarns and being captivated by it. And you know, to be honest, you know, it's probably a better training than watching endless episodes of CSI where the same plots are recycled.
Right.
And so finally, when you get to be 22 years old, you've now seen 20,000 hours of narrative, and there's nothing left to entrance you.
Yeah.
Very true.
But did you feel a need to write at a young age? Did you write a lot as a youngster?
Oh, I wanted to get it out there. So the first fantasy, of course, was to be a minister. And so I went door to door, and I was one of those kids who would bug you door to door and give you leaflets and ask about the condition of your soul. And then I lost that lot of its attraction, and I read about Clarence Darrow. I thought, oh, that's what I can be. But then, of course, I realized I couldn't get along with people well enough. And that only left being a writer, where you didn't even have to get along with people. And so I started writing basically journalism. And then luckily enough, along comes 1966, and that whole world explodes. And being a journalist is all of a sudden being politically active. Mm-hmm. And it was a very exciting time.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I recall reading a quote from you where you said that if you had to choose over again, you might not necessarily pick cinema as your art form of choice. You know, is there something limiting about filmmaking you find?
That's a slight misquote.
Okay.
If I had to choose back then, I would make the same choice. If I had to choose today, I would not choose movies, because I think movies are over. But that's another discussion, probably one that your listeners don't want to hear.
No, we can get into that.
That's a huge conversation there. Maybe we'll save that one for a little while. But I am definitely interested in exploring that some before we let you go. But your early days in film criticism and your relationship with Pauline Kael, who we're also crazy about on this show. The impression I get from her is she kind of was as she wrote. She was funny, challenging, and acerbic, but kind of hard to resist. Is that how you found her?
Yeah, I mean, she was tough, you know.
Yeah.
And she sort of plucked me out of nowhere. I was taking some summer courses at Columbia. I'd taken some time off from Calvin College, my college, because I hadn't seen any movies, and I was getting interested in movies, and of course we didn't show movies at Calvin, so I spent a summer at Columbia, and through meeting somebody in a bar at night who happened to know her, and the next thing I know, I'm in her apartment, and the next thing I know, I'm staying over on her couch because we talked all night long, and the next thing I know, the next morning, she's saying to me, we're going to stay in touch, and you're not going to be a minister, you're going to be a film critic.
Wow.
So that sort of turned my life around, and she got me into UCLA grad film school, and you know, without that kind of serendipitous meeting, I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Well, looking through your website and reading some of those some of those early reviews, they're just fantastic, and much like Paul and Cale's work that we're all so in awe of. But today it seems a little different. I mean, do you sense less and less relevance or merit in the film criticism of today? It's more like Consumer Reports today.
Well, you've touched on a pretty big subject, and why has the horse of movies fallen down? And there's four legs on that horse, and one of them is audiences, and one is critics, and one is filmmakers, and one is financiers.
Right.
And when that horse falls down, one leg can't get it standing up again. Mm-hmm. And so, the collapse of relevant film criticism, and it's not a total collapse, there's still a lot of good people out there.
Oh, yeah.
But the importance of criticism is just mirrored by the collapse in all the other sectors. Movies simply do not have the place in our society that they did 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
They've been relatively marginalized. And that is just a product of changing times, but also, more importantly, changing media.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that we've touched on this the second time, let's go ahead and explore it.
Yeah, I'm dying to hear this.
Yeah, this is the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Now everything comes in kind of waves. I mean, the new Hollywood, the Hollywood Renaissance, of which you were such a critical part in the 70s. Do you think that we'll ever get to that place again, or do you think it's a point of no return that we're at?
No, that's gone. What's interesting about the moment we find ourselves in now is that when I came into films, late 60s, it was a moment of crisis, but it was a crisis of content. People didn't know what movies were about. They realized they couldn't be about what they used to be about, but what were they about? And then people started making films about different things. Along came Easy Rider, along came Last Picture Show, and all of a sudden you realize that you can make films about these subjects. And it changed the American film industry. And it ushered in, actually, a very wonderful period of filmmaking. We're in a similar period of crisis now. Unfortunately, the nature of the crisis is not what movies are about, but what are movies. We no longer know what movies are. We don't know how long they are. We don't know where you watch them. You don't know whether you interact with them. You don't know whether they have narrative or not. I mean, and it's very exciting creatively, but movies are morphing into something else. And like yesterday, I went to the movies, and I saw The Bank Job, and I saw 3 movies. I saw Berlin Girl, and then I saw Paranoid Park. Mm-hmm. And it was the last movie. I said, well, there's a movie that was made now. That's sort of what's happening now.
Right.
And so we are trying to figure out what the movies are. The producer of the film before my last film, who had produced 10 films, has left the producing business and now has a website where he has contests and he makes 3-minute movies for cell phones. This is a guy with a whole string of credits.
Right.
Yeah. And that's how big the paradigm shift we're facing is right now. And it is kind of fascinating. I just finished the script, and it had a lot of kind of sexual material. It was about 3 nights in the life of an escort and her driver. And I thought to myself, I was going to write it feature length, and I was going to write it R-rated, because that's the tradition I come from.
Right.
And I thought, wait a second, why am I making this R? There is no R anymore. Theaters are on their way out.
Right.
Why don't I just make it hardcore? Because that's what the material is. I mean, it's about a girl who goes into assignations all night long. Well, why don't you just write what's happening? And why does it have to be an hour and a half, 2 hours? Maybe it's 3 20 minutes. And so I wrote this script, and it ended up being 320 minutes, and it ended up being unrated. And I thought, well, we'll make it for $400,000, and and it's a very kind of a cheap movie, and we'll set up a website and we'll sell it on the web. So if that's happening to me, and God knows, I'm an old fart. If that's what's going on in my head, you can imagine what's going on in the heads of people who are, 40 years younger than I am.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about this influx of new media, but how movies as we have known them are kind of losing their identity.
Right.
But doesn't it open up a flood of new options? And do you sense that movies no longer matter? Is that part of what you're sensing?
Well, audiovisual entertainment is, in our bloodstreams. And it is as hard as it is for someone of my generation to conceive of a movie being watched on a cell phone in 3-minute segments. That may be part of the new mix of what AV is. And maybe that word AV will start to replace the word movies. Because movies we think of as a 2-hour experience you sit in the theater and watch in the dark.
Yeah.
And time is not on the side of the movies, but it will always be on the side of storytelling, and as storytelling has progressed now as an audiovisual medium.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse
me.
I'm
34, and I dread the day that we're relegated to watching films on the cell phone.
Yes, so do I.
Absolutely with you.
But Mr. Schrader, do you think the theater-going experience will become obsolete?
No, but it will start to mirror more and more the theatrical experience. It will become more of an event.
You think it will be like the preview, basically the movie, going to the theater is almost going to be like just an incredibly expensive ad for the DVD?
Well, there won't be DVDs.
Oh, that's true. That's going to go too.
Within 4 years, DVDs are gone. You can put them right next to your CDs.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm losing money by the day here. But we do see that today. We do see that today where people don't want to pluck down $15 for a film unless they're going to be wowed like they're at an amusement park.
Yeah.
And that's been happening for over 2 decades now.
Yeah.
And well, here's another interesting phenomenon. We're now creating a generation of young people who don't think they should pay for entertainment. Why should I pay for music? Mm-hmm. Music is in the air. Music is free. Music is file shared. It started with music. Now it's happening with pornography. The web is full of...
Well, didn't the pornography come first, though, the free? That came before the music.
No, not free pornography.
Oh, okay.
Pornography is now free. The web is full of watch me and my girlfriend websites.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of a sudden now, we don't need to pay for music. We don't need to pay for porn. Why should we pay for movies?
And you can't stop that. Once that genie's out of the bottle, you're never going to be able to enforce that.
Yeah, and you can make music and you can make porn in your living room. It's
you can do anything.
I
mean, God knows I do both.
Okay, but this comes from the punk movement, the do-it-yourself movement. The Internet is sort of the ultimate realization of this.
So it's awfully hard to make, movies of scale in your living room.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Even with those little toy soldiers.
If you'll permit us to go back through some of the great films that do grace your resume. We were talking about the film criticism. I want to know, are you able to apply that same kind of critical thinking to your own work from your early days as a critic?
I try not to. It's rough because I am, basically an analytical person.
Yeah.
But a film critic is in many ways like a medical examiner. He looks at the body and tries to explain how and why it lived and whether its life had any value. A filmmaker is like a pregnant woman. She's just trying to give birth to this thing.
Yeah.
And if you let that medical examiner half of you into the birthing room, he will kill that baby.
Oh, that is beautifully stated. Yeah.
So you've got to keep him out because he's not interested in seeing that baby live. He's just interested in dissecting it.
But if you look back at your career, are there films that you can see and you can see, yeah, that presents a major period of growth for me, or is it a mistake to take out any title and single out any title in particular?
Well, I mean, look, they don't all work, and there are lesser and greater successes and lesser and greater failures, and you try not to, advertise your failures too much, because occasionally you run into people who actually think they're good, and at which point you just bite your lip and look at your shoes and say thank you.
Right.
But I mean, in my mind, I know which ones work and I know which ones failed, and I sort of know why. And the hardest part is when you're actually in the process of doing it, keeping yourself from overanalyzing it, because it's a living, breathing kind of mutating thing. It changes right in front of your eyes, and you have to walk every day. You have to walk on the set or over to the keyboard with an absolutely open mind.
Yeah, and you say that it's such a living thing. Isn't the outcome of a great movie? Isn't it kind of not to be defined in a way? I mean, I look at Taxi Driver, and we brought this up Wednesday. A great screenplay, great star, great director, but there was something else that makes this a timeless movie. Some kind of indefinable chemistry where you all were living in that place.
Well, it's called the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I mean, the three of us happened to meet at the right time in our lives, but we also met in the right time sociologically. And we were, on the cusp and fearless without even knowing how fearless we were, because it felt so real, so right. And, occasionally you get lucky that way.
Well, in terms of Taxi Driver, I mean, there's such. It seems like you all were just so hungry to explore that world. And I'm wondering how much of a presence were you on that set?
Not much, because I was already beginning to direct my first film.
Sure.
I was there during pre-production, and we rewrote the script a bit during pre-production. And I think I visited the set twice while we were shooting.
Only twice, okay.
But I was in Los Angeles working, trying to set up Blue Collar at that time.
Sure.
And also, I happen to believe that by the time a director is making a film, if the writer hasn't gotten it right, he never will. And it no longer belongs to him anymore. And Bobby called me once from the set, and he said, I was thinking, do you think Travis would say this in a scene he was going to do the next day? And I said, Bobby, you're in New York. I'm in L.A. You're wearing my shirt and my boots, which he was.
Yeah.
You're making the film. If you think this character would say that, he probably would.
Look at that. That's a beautiful little touch. Nickel-plated, snub-nosed. Otherwise, it's the same as a service revolver. That'll stop anything that moves. A Magnum, they use that in Africa for killing elephants. That 38, that's a fine gun. Some of these guns are like toys. That 38, you go out and hammer nails with it all day, come back and it'll cut dead center on target every time. It's got a really nice action to it, and a heck of a wallop. You interested in automatic? It's a Colt 25 automatic. It's a nice little gun. It's a beautiful little gun. Holds 6 shots in a clip, 1 shot in the chamber. If you're dumb enough to put a round in the chamber. Here, look at this. 380 Walther. Holds 8 shots in the clip. That's a nice gun. Yeah, that's a beautiful little gun. Look at that. How much for everything? All together. Well, only a jackass would carry that cannon in the streets like that. Here. Here's a beautiful handmade holster I had made in Mexico. $40. $350 for the Magnum, $250 for the 38, 1 1/4 for the 25, 150 for the 380. You take this. Oh, wait here, I'll walk down with you. How about dope? Grass, hash, coke, mescaline, downers, Nebutal, Tunol, chloral hydrates. How about uppers, amphetamines?
No, I'm not interested in that stuff.
Crystal meth. I can get you crystal meth. Nitrous oxide. How about that? How about a Cadillac? I get you a brand new Cadillac with the pink slip for $2,000.
If the actor is in the zone and the director is in the zone, they don't need a writer anymore. They're now living the life.
Right.
I completely. If I can ask real quick, I know that you're often asked about a sequel to Taxi Driver, and I think you've pretty much shot it down and said that that's not a possibility. But in a way, do you feel that Bringing Out the Dead is kind of the closest thing we have to a sequel to Taxi Driver?
Well, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it was written for a young person, and circumstances prevailed, and an actor was cast who was 10 years too old. So it didn't have the buzz that it should have, which would have given it that Taxi Driver buzz.
Yeah.
You had a kind of a midlife guy having an adolescent crisis.
Yes. Okay. But I do feel like a kind of an arc, kind of a full circle between that and Taxi Driver, and kind of a maturity as well. We talked about it on Wednesday's show, whereas Taxi Driver, the only release, the only orgasm, if you will, that this character can enjoy is an act of violence. And Bring Out the Dead, all he wants is peace, and he seems to be coming from that same place as Bickle did. Do you sense that? I mean, did you craft it like that?
Yeah, I mean, you try not to get too on the nose.
Yeah.
I've written these 4 scripts, which I think in my mind are sort of linked, which is Taxi Driver, American Gigolo, Light Sleeper, and The Walker.
Yeah.
And a guy 20, 30, 40, 50. And he's a taxi driver, he's a gigolo, he's a drug dealer, and he's a society walker.
Right.
In most people's minds, there's no real connection with these kind of people. But in my mind, there is. To my mind, that's the evolution of a soul.
Absolutely.
And so that's the kind of artistic glue that makes something cook, because it's not 1-to-1. It's sort of 1.5 to 1. And, and whenever there really are connections, if they're 1-to-1, they're not very interesting. They always have to be slightly off to make them interesting.
There's a movie of yours that I keep coming back to time and time again, and I watch it at least once a year, and that film is Hardcore. A dynamic performance from George C. Scott, but that wasn't necessarily the most harmonious of relationships, was it?
Well, yeah. Well, there's a lot of George stories, and I could fill up a considerable amount of time with George stories.
Yeah.
and I don't want this to, we'll give this another 15 minutes, but I think that we start to bring it together.
Okay.
If you want to go into George stories, I'll give you a George story, though.
I would be delighted to hear a George story. Whatever you can offer us today would be great.
Okay, so we are, George is an alcoholic, was at the time. And his agent said, in the contract, allot 3 lost days to alcoholism, which we did, and surprisingly enough, that we lost 3 days due to alcoholism. So she obviously knew her business. So we're shooting in San Francisco, and we're in the red light district, and it's a Saturday night, and we have a scene that's quite complicated in one direction, which George is not in. It's very simple the other direction, which George is in. And so I said to the AD, what should we do? And he said, well, go for the meat. Always go for the meat, meaning shoot the most complicated stuff first.
Sure.
So we shot that. We dragged George, which was a huge mistake, because that left him in his trailer for 3-4 hours. So when we turned around the cameras, when we sent for George, I started getting the messages. He won't come. He won't come on. So we sent the second AD, sent the first AD, sent the production manager. The producer happened to be there. We sent the producer. George won't come out. He wants to talk to you. So I go there, and he is sitting in the back of the trailer in his skivvies. And I had another experience with him summerly. When he got drunk, he always tended to take off his clothes. And when the first time I met him, he was in a bar, and he was completely nude. He had taken off all his clothes. He was drunk. And so I as soon as I saw him sitting there in the skivvy, I thought, oh, fuck, he's smashed. So I went over to him, and you know, I tried to explain to him that you know, we needed him on the set, blah blah blah. And he said, this movie's a piece of shit.
Oh.
You know, and I said, oh, you know, George, you know, when you're making a movie, sometimes you lose faith, you get a little disillusioned, but in the end, I said, oh, she said, shut up, it's a piece of shit. It's a piece of shit, and you're a piece of shit director.
Oh, no.
He said, you're a good writer, but you're a terrible director. And so I sat down with him, and I talked some more, and trying to find a way to... Finally, I said to him, I said, George, we've got 2 shots to do with you here tonight. I can combine them into 1 shot. Now, I'll light the shot, and you can walk right from the trailer, and as soon as you walk in, we'll say action, and you just say these 2 lines and exit, and then you can go in your car and you go home. If you don't do that, we have to come back here next Monday rather than be in San Diego, and you will have to be on this film 2 more days. And that made some sense to him. So he slapped me on the shoulder and said, okay, good, I'll do it, kid, but only under 1 condition. I said, well, what's that? He said, you have to promise me that you will never direct another motion picture. And I got on my hands and knees in that trailer and knelt before George and put my hands in the praying position and said, Mr. Scott, I promise you, I will never direct another motion picture. And he slapped me on the shoulder. He said, good, kid, good. All right, let's go.
Oh, that is a classic.
That is. It's great.
A controversial subject, a brilliant actor, a powerful and touching film. A movie which will take you into a world never dealt with in a major motion picture. A father searches for his missing daughter, only to find she has been used in a sordid and shocking way.
Turn it off!
George C. Scott, Hardcore, rated R. Coming soon to a selected theater near you.
I know you've got like 10 minutes with us. I want to ask about your future. I want to ask about Adam Resurrected, and then close with your film canon, because I had a question I was just dying to ask you from that. We have a caller. Let me see if we can take a call real quick with a question for you. 210 area code. Go ahead.
Hey guys, it's Aaron.
Hey Aaron.
Hey Aaron.
Hey, I'm the hey Mr. Schrader. This is quite an honor. I'm the home entertainment editor of Movie Geeks United. And it's just an honor to talk to you. I was just wondering, just to bring it back earlier, too, on film criticism, I was wondering what you thought on the current state of criticism, and that so many critics, it seems not only on mid-level papers, but now it seems to have been reported that buyouts of major critics like David Ansen at Newsweek are occurring. And I was wondering, what do you think of these?
Well, you're confusing 2 issues. One issue is, the general decline of film criticism.
Right.
The other larger issue is the absolute collapse of the newspaper business.
Right.
Now, the newspaper business is going down in flames.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, who knew when the internet came up that there's a swath of destruction? First came the music business, now the newspaper business, and who knows, next maybe the movie business.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just wiping out a lot of stuff. But the newspaper business is in the crash and burn mode. So there's a lot of interesting criticism, but, it's spread all over the place. My friend David Kerr, who writes the DVD reviews for the New York Times,
right.
He's got a very interesting website, A lot of James Rosenbaum has a website, Roger Ebert's website. There's a lot of interesting criticism going on. There's only a few places left for the heavyweights to work, the David Denbys and the David Aronsons, the Peter Travers of this world. But, the criticism is mutating to the web, which is, unfortunate because it doesn't pay any money. I'm friends with Scott Foundas, who's a critic for LA Weekly and Variety.
Right.
And, Scott can't make a living because there is no economic underpinning for the film criticism business anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, to complete my question, what I was curious is that the internet has created this new avenue for criticism, and it seems that there is a hunger for discussion of film on the internet, but it seems that the irony is that now there seems to be no economic incentive for that it seems almost to be truly done out of passion and love for film, for the medium of film.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a pity because a real working film critic has bills like the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron,
for your call. We'll see you next week on the show. Just real quick, this is a fun question. Your film canon that was published in the Film Comment magazine a couple of years ago. Mr. Goldblum, when he was on our show, he talked about the essential films that you gave him to look over, which are films that you return to before you embark on any new work. Rules of the Game, Masculine, Feminine, Tokyo Story. There was a title in the film canon that I am dying to hear your take on, and it's the most recent film on the canon, and that is The Big Lebowski. I'm dying to know Paul Schrader's take on The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, really.
Well, that's a very hard film to make, and comedy is not easy. And,
no, it's not.
And I mean, good comedy.
No, that's what I mean. It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, cock-out jokes, but I mean, really smart comedy that makes you think while you're laughing. And I think I put in like 4 comedies in that list. I put in a Keaton, a Chaplin. I put in Lady Eve. Maybe the Marx Brothers, maybe not. But then I thought, who's really? And I think Big Lebowski will absolutely stand the test of time, and it will get better and better known and better appreciated. And it's already happening. And it's a rare example of a comedy that truly has the chops of greatness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And such a comedy of behaviors over a comedy of punchlines. It's all in the rhythms and the dynamics between those characters. It's amazingly funny. And you're working with Criterion now. Are you working with Criterion on Mishima? How close?
Yeah, well, I'm just about finished. It comes out in June now. We've been fooling around with this for almost a year and a half. Doing a new DI for Mishima, adding a scene, doing some sky replacement, and then all the extras and everything. And I'm really glad that we're getting this out. We had to wait 25 years because after 25 years, the rights reverted from Warner Brothers to Francis Coppola and George Lucas. And once they got a hold of it, then we were able to sell it to Criterion and have this reissue.
Oh, bless Criterion. They do great work.
Yeah, they do awesome work. I'm going to buy it, even though the DVD is going to become obsolete. I'm going to buy it.
Well, it'll look nice on your shelf.
That's right.
That's great. So tell me where you are with Adam Resurrected. We heard from Mr. Goldblum about that film. It sounds like an incredibly challenging, exciting project.
I have a good feeling about that film. It is very, very bold, very unique, and it is a kind of above-the-fold movie.
Yeah.
There's a phrase in the newspaper business, a story is above the fold or below the fold.
Right.
And a film like The Walker is kind of a below-the-fold movie, but Adam is definitely above the fold. It's kind of a big subject and a very bold undertaking, and, Jeff gives, the performance that he has spent his whole life preparing to give.